He was reborn, and rushed to defend the girl who once burned me with a cigarette. But I was reborn too. And this time I didn't cry. I dragged her face into a toilet, called the cops myself, and watched their empire collapse. There's something almost poetic about the way pain wakes you up. It strips away the fog, rips through illusions, and forces clarity. The burning end of Brielle Monroe's cigarette touched my skin with a hiss, right above the wrist, and for the first time in a long time I smiled. Because this time I was ready. This was the same restroom. The same girl. The same pain. But I wasn't the same Ivy anymore. You really thought you could crawl back into Nathan's life? Brielle sneered, grinding the cigarette deeper as the scent of smoke filled my nostrils. Just because Eleanor Hale took pity on you? You're still trash. Her voice dripped with mockery, but I wasn't listening to her words anymore. My pulse was steady. My body felt alive. Because this was the moment I remembered. I'd been here before. In my past life I stayed quiet. I endured. I bled behind locked doors and smiled in public. But now I was reborn. I grabbed her wrist hard enough to make her gasp and twisted. Her smug expression shattered as she let out a startled yelp. What the hell? I stepped forward. My feet were steady. My voice calm. You said no one would come, right? What? She blinked, confused and scared. You had your people block the stairwell, I said again, tilting my head. So no teacher will pass by. She smirked through her pain. Obviously. I always cover my tracks. Perfect. In a blink, I dragged her into one of the restroom stalls, slammed the door shut and shoved her toward the toilet. You've lost your damn mind. Her shriek was cut short as I dunked her head into the toilet bowl. The water splashed. Her heels scraped against the floor. She thrashed like a wild animal. But I didn't let go. All I could hear was my own heartbeat. Not rage, clarity. Not revenge, justice. Brielle Monroe had tormented me for years. Slapped me, poured acid into my water bottle, stuffed razors into my pencil case, stalked me after class, and destroyed every little pocket of safety I'd ever built in this school. And in the end, he got away with it. Protected. Celebrated. Married into the family I had given everything to. But not this time. I pulled her head out for a second. Her soaked hair clung to her cheeks, mascara running down like black rain. He tried to scream. I shoved her back in. Her screams turned to gurgles. When I finally let go, she collapsed onto the tile floor, coughing and gagging. I crouched beside her. Still think you're untouchable? You're crazy, she gasped, trembling. I reached into her pocket and pulled out the cigarette pack and lighter. Bright red. Just like I remembered. My hand curled around it tightly. I'm going to report you, she sobbed. You'll get expelled. My mother will make sure of it. I grabbed her hair again and yanked her to her feet. Go ahead and report me, I said coolly. But remember this, so long as I'm in this school, every single day will be like today. Your words, remember? You said that to me. When you dragged me behind the gym and carved your name into my notebook. Her face went pale. I shoved her away hard enough for her to stumble. She scrambled out of the stall, wet, humiliated, shaking. And gone. I stayed where I was. My chest was rising, falling. But I wasn't finished. I turned, looked at the rusty old pipe on the stall wall, and slammed the side of my head into it. Pain exploded behind my eyes. Blood trickled past my eyebrow. I welcomed it. I staggered back against the wall and took out my phone. The screen blurred slightly as I dialed. Emergency services, the operator answered calmly. What's the nature of your emergency? I'd like to report a school assault, I said, my voice quiet but clear. Springvale High. Girls' restroom, science building. Are you safe right now? Yes, I said. But I'd like the principal and police present when I give my statement. And I have evidence. I ended the call. Then I dropped the cigarette pack on the floor, let the lighter fall beside it and took one final breath. My arm throbbed from the burn. My head pounded from the impact. And my uniform was soaked from the broken pipe behind me. But my heart, steady. 15 minutes later, my homeroom teacher stood beside me, clutching my shoulder as we walked slowly down the hall toward the principal's office. My hand was bandaged and in a sling. The school nurse had cleaned my wounds but said I'd need a hospital visit and an x-ray. That was fine. I needed the documentation. As we turned the corner, I heard shouting inside the office. She assaulted my sister. Nathan Hale's voice boomed from behind the door. Of course. I knew that voice like the back of my hand. I had heard it in boardrooms, at galas, on wedding nights, and during my miscarriage in the sterile, silent hospital room. That voice never came for me. Never fought for me. And yet here he was in this timeline screaming for her. She's dangerous, he shouted. Expel her. I don't care what excuse she has. Brielle is the victim here. A sharp laugh nearly escaped me. The irony was nauseating. The teacher opened the door slowly and helped me inside. The first thing I saw was Brielle, curled dramatically in Nathan's arms, sobbing. Her soaked clothes clung to her body like cellophane. Her hair, wet and tangled, dripped onto his shirt. And Nathan held her like she was made of glass. His jaw clenched. His eyes red. As if this was some tragic love story. As if I were the villain. Across the room Eleanor Hale sat, dressed in flawless ivory, pearl necklace gleaming. Her eyes landed on me and for a split second her expression changed. Shock? Disbelief. I gave her a small nod. Mrs. Hale, I said politely, stepping forward. I'm sorry we have to meet under these circumstances. She stood quickly and approached me. Her gaze moved over my injuries. My swollen wrist, my bruised temple, the cigarette burn visible just under my torn collar. What happened? She asked, voice colder now. I bit my lip. Hesitated. Then, Brielle cornered me in the restroom after school. She made sure no one could come. Then she attacked me. She's lying. Brielle shrieked, flinching as if I'd struck her. She hit me first. Look at me. I'm soaked. I tilted my head. That's because you shoved me into a pipe and it burst. The water sprayed everywhere. The room fell into silence. I looked down. She burned me with a cigarette. Tore my shirt. Called me names I'd rather not repeat. Madeline, is this true? Eleanor's voice wasn't motherly. It was sharp. Brielle's face turned pale. I didn't mean to. My eyes flicked to the corner of her pocket, where the outline of that same red cigarette pack peeked through. And so did Eleanor's. She stepped forward and without a word, reached into Brielle's pocket and pulled out the soggy pack. The lighter fell to the floor with a soft click. The silence was thunderous. You still want to lie to me? Eleanor asked, low and dangerous. Brielle's lip trembled. You're taking her side? Apologize to Ivy, Eleanor said. Brielle's eyes filled with disbelief. You slapped me. For her. She's not family, Nathan said suddenly, standing. Brielle is. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The knock on the door came just then. The police. I turned, stepping away from them all to greet the officers. Thank you for coming, I said smoothly. The school has surveillance. I believe it will show what happened. And then, without looking back, I stepped aside and let justice walk in. The real show. The moment the police stepped inside, the air shifted. Everyone stood, even the principal, who had until now reclined smugly behind his desk. Eleanor Hale turned slightly, straightening her already perfect posture. Brielle whimpered, shrinking deeper into Nathan's arms. Nathan, red-faced and breathless, pointed at me like a prosecutor in a court drama. Officers, she's dangerous, he said. You need to take her away. She assaulted my sister. Calm down, the taller officer cut in, brushing past him. We'll hear all sides. We're here to review the incident and request any available school footage. But she's lying. Nathan continued, still breathless. This girl is manipulating all of you. She's done this before. I suggest you let us do our job, the officer replied, stone-faced. It was the first time Nathan had ever been told no so directly. His mouth opened but nothing came out. The officers turned to me next. Miss Ivy Chin? I nodded. Yes. You placed the emergency call? I did. I have visible injuries, I said quietly, holding up my bandaged wrist. I also request you check the camera mounted above the south entrance to the science building. It may have partial footage of what happened. The younger officer blinked. That camera's usually blocked by trees. Not in autumn, I said simply. The leaves fell last week. Eleanor's eyes flicked toward me. Her gaze was sharp now, calculating. She hadn't known about the camera. But I had. In my last life, I learned about it years later. During a boardroom renovation proposal after I became CEO of Hale Corporation. I remembered every line of that building's blueprint. Every corner. Every blind spot. Every angle. This time I'd planned for all of it. The officers nodded and left briefly with the school's IT director to pull footage. The room sat in tense silence. Brielle sniffled. Nathan glared. Eleanor looked at me as though trying to peer into a locked vault. And I kept breathing. 10 minutes later, the officers returned with a laptop. They set it on the table, turned the screen, and hit play. The footage began. A wide-angle view from above the back stairwell. Faintly, through the now bare tree branches, we could see the side of the science building. A window. The edge of the girls' restroom. It wasn't a perfect shot, but it was enough. A flash of red, Brielle Monroe's cigarette glowing in the fading afternoon light, pressed toward something below the window frame. Her face. Her movement. Her smile. That was all. Nathan leaned forward, squinting. The footage rewound. Played again. And again. It's not clear enough, Nathan stammered. That could be anything. It doesn't prove she. Let me finish, the officer said firmly. He pulled out a clear Ziploc bag. Inside it, the cigarette pack and lighter I'd returned to the floor. Both were recovered and labeled as evidence. Fingerprints, the officer said. Saliva. It's all here. We've already got a partial trace. Brielle's prints are all over the cigarette butts retrieved from the scene. But she's not the only one who smokes, Nathan argued weakly. The officer raised an eyebrow. Also, security footage showed 3 girls positioned at both stairwells during the time of the incident. All 3 admitted they were stationed there by Miss Monroe. Eleanor stiffened beside the principal. Brielle let out a sob. They're lying. They're jealous of me. You think me, would need to station people just to get a girl alone? I was defending myself. She dunked me into a toilet. She did what? Eleanor hissed. She assaulted me first. Brielle screamed. You're all falling for her act. We've taken statements, the officer said calmly. And one of your accomplices mentioned another incident last year involving a girl from class 4. Name, Mei Zhang. I looked up sharply. She tried to jump off the roof, the officer continued. The same group of girls admitted Brielle orchestrated an assault after May was teased by Nathan for her appearance. Miss Monroe apparently viewed it as a betrayal. Gasps rippled across the room. Even the principal, who had long danced to the Hale family's tune, looked stunned now. You're saying, Eleanor began slowly, that Brielle had a history of doing this? Multiple incidents, ma'am, the officer confirmed. And now we have corroborated statements from victims and witnesses. Nathan staggered backward as if someone had struck him. He looked at the laptop. At me. At Brielle. Then back again. No, he whispered. No. This can't be real. He turned to Eleanor. Mom, tell them. Tell them it's not true. Brielle wouldn't. Eleanor was silent. Brielle started sobbing louder, pushing herself off the couch and crawling toward Eleanor on her knees. Aunt Eleanor, they're twisting things, she begged, mascara streaked across her cheeks. I didn't mean to, I was just scared, Olivia was threatening me. My name is Ivy, I said quietly. I never laid a hand on you until after you branded my skin. Brielle lunged toward me, eyes blazing. You ruined me. You manipulated everything. One of the officers stepped in, handcuffing her swiftly. That's enough, he snapped. Brielle shrieked. I'm going to sue you, you little orphan freak. You think you can destroy me? Just wait, wait. She was dragged out of the room, still screaming. Nathan stood paralyzed, staring at the empty doorway she'd been yanked through. Then slowly, his knees buckled. He sank to the floor, hands gripping his hair, eyes wild. How could this be happening? No one spoke. Eleanor remained seated, elegant and untouched, her gaze fixed firmly on the wall, emotionless. I didn't move. Let them spiral. Let them feel the weight of what they'd built. The lies. The favoritism. The silent enabling. This was their mess. I had simply pulled back the curtain. The officers gathered the evidence and left shortly after. The principal began murmuring something about formal disciplinary reviews, external hearings, school board statements, and media risk management. I tuned it all out. Nathan finally lifted his head. His face was pale. Bloodshot eyes locked onto mine. It was you, he said, voice hoarse. You planned all of this. I raised an eyebrow. What exactly did I plan? I asked softly. Did I light the cigarette? Call in accomplices? Station girls at stairwells? Dunk myself into a broken pipe? He didn't answer. Because he couldn't. Brielle burned me, I said, stepping toward him. She called me names. She stalked me. And in my last life, you stood right there and did nothing. His eyes widened. That last part had slipped. But I didn't care anymore. Let him wonder. Let him squirm. I just wanted the truth, I said. Then, without waiting for permission, I turned and walked out of the principal's office. The hallway outside was empty, quiet, like the eye of a storm. I looked up through the windows at the golden sky. Autumn light poured in like fire through stained glass. In my old life, this day would have destroyed me. But this time, it had freed me. Let the world fall apart behind me. I was just getting started. When I stepped out of the principal's office, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a thunderstorm, when the sky is too exhausted to rain anymore. I walked down the hall slowly, the sling holding my arm still tight, the bandage on my temple slightly damp from where it pressed against my skin. Behind me, Brielle was screaming. Nathan was crumbling. Eleanor was calculating. But I was done. For today. The next morning, my homeroom teacher called me in before the first bell. Her face was stiff, lips pressed into a line as she shut the door behind us. Ivy, she said gently, I've been asked to inform you that your financial aid has been revoked. My stomach didn't drop. Not even a flutter. Effective immediately, she added. Also, the school board is now requiring all tuition fees for your final year to be paid in advance. There was Eleanor's move. I nodded slowly. How much? Springvale's tuition is $15,000, she said. You received a scholarship and merit-based funding this year, but without the aid, you'll need to pay the full amount. I understand, I said. Sorry, Ivy, she whispered. This wasn't the school's decision. I smiled faintly. I know. It's Eleanor Hale's. The teacher's eyes widened in surprise, but I didn't elaborate. She didn't need to know that Eleanor Hale had summoned me to her private sitting room the night before. It had been just the two of us. The room was drenched in candlelight and old perfume. I sat across from her on a velvet chair, my injured arm resting in my lap, my tea untouched. I don't like my family's name in police reports, she'd said coolly. I didn't respond. I believe in consequences, she continued, but not in scandal. You've already humiliated Brielle publicly. Isn't that enough? I stared at her calmly. She set down her teacup with a soft clink and leaned forward. I'll give you $1 million, she said. Sign a leniency agreement. Drop the charges. Make this disappear. I let out a soft laugh. Not polite. Not cruel. Just honest. $1 million. I repeated. She raised an eyebrow. That's more than generous for someone in your situation. I shook my head. I'd pay $1 million of my own money just to watch her rot behind bars. Her smile vanished. What happened to you? She said sharply. You used to be obedient, quiet, grateful. You used to pretend to be kind, I replied. The air turned icy. She leaned back in her chair, fingers curling around the porcelain edge of her cup. I'm very disappointed in you, Ivy, she said coldly. I tilted my head. Likewise. By lunchtime that day, the news had spread. Ivy Chin had lost her scholarship. Whispers floated across the hall like ash in the wind. She's going to have to drop out. She doesn't even have parents, right? No one to pay for her. How embarrassing. I ignored them all. They didn't know me. They didn't know what I had in my head. What I'd built once and would build again. That evening, I sat at my rented desk in a dingy internet cafe downtown, the walls stained with smoke and instant ramen. It smelled like desperation and potential. My cast sat on the table beside me while I typed with my good hand, pain flaring up my spine every few minutes. But I didn't stop. Because I could still see it all, the future I once lived. In my past life, I'd led one of the top 10 tech firms in the country. I had turned a floundering software group into the empire that became Hale Systems. But not anymore. Hale was Eleanor's name. Not mine. And I had no intention of handing her my legacy this time. I wrote 3 algorithmic models over the next 7 days. All built from the same theoretical core that had once taken me a decade to master. On the 8th day, I saved them to a USB drive and boarded a crowded bus to Startup Village, the underground tech zone on the city's edge. There, hidden behind a crumbling gray building, was an office that looked like it belonged to a laundry service. Rusted iron doors. Faded windows. No logo. But I knew what was inside. In my past life, this place had housed one of the most brilliant minds I'd ever met. Lucas Reed. He was a coding prodigy with zero social skills, terrible posture, and a genius understanding of natural language search logic. He was also the man whose work had been overshadowed and buried because his product launched too late. I wasn't going to let that happen again. I knocked once. No answer. Twice. Still nothing. Then I banged loudly. Finally, the door creaked open, revealing a tall, unkempt guy with wild curls and eyes like thunderclouds. "What?" he said flatly. "Lucas Reed." He blinked. "Who's asking?" "Ivy Chin. I have something you need." He looked me over once. "You're a teenager. And you're a man-child running a multi-million-dollar algorithm on a PC that still runs Vista." His eyebrow twitched. I held up the USB. "These are 3 of the 5 core language models you've been missing. I can write the other 2. But I want terms." Now I had his attention. 10 minutes later, I was seated on a lopsided couch inside his cluttered lab, across from his only other teammate, a round, excitable guy named Theo who looked like a roly-poly in a hoodie. Theo plugged in my USB. "This is a joke, right?" he muttered. "She looks like she just passed midterms." "Shut up and run the code," Lucas said quietly. Theo sighed, double-clicked the file. We waited. 10 seconds. 15. Then, "Oh my God," Theo whispered. Lucas stood up. "What?" "It works. Lucas, it works. Deployment time just dropped to 8 minutes. Theo started laughing. "I thought it was broken, but it's running like a dream." Lucas stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "What about cross-platform compatibility?" he asked. "No issues," I replied. "It runs on Windows, Linux, and MacOS." Silence. Then Lucas let out a breath. "We could launch in 3 months. You'll have competition by then," I said calmly, biting into the cream bread Theo handed me. "That international engine? It goes public in 3 months. You want first mover advantage? Launch in 2. Impossible." "Not with me," I said. Lucas folded his arms. "And your terms?" 5,000, I said. Theo choked on his soda. "You want what?" Lucas frowned. 5,000 yuan? I shook my head. "Cash. By tonight." Theo looked horrified. "Do you think we're minting bills in here?" Lucas studied me. "Why cash?" "Because Eleanor Hale just cut off my financial aid," I said. "And tuition is due tomorrow." He said nothing. Then nodded. "I'll transfer it. But if you're lying." "I'm not." 2 hours later, I held a thick white envelope in my hand. And just like that, I was no longer cornered. I had bought myself time. I had bought myself freedom. And for the first time in this life, I walked down that alley with money in my bag, software in my brain, and a plan in motion. The bank smelled like ink and old money. The security guard looked up with barely disguised suspicion when I walked in with my cast and dusty hoodie, flanked by a tall man in a hoodie that had more coffee stains than fabric. Lucas didn't care. He moved like someone who belonged in every room, not because of confidence but because he never bothered to ask for permission. "You sure this is enough?" he asked, standing behind me at the teller window. "More than enough," I said. He didn't look convinced. "You're still a minor. They may not let you open an account alone." "I'm not alone, am I?" I said. They got a small smirk from him. The teller returned. "Done. The account's active. Here's your card. And this is the withdrawal you requested." She handed me a fat white envelope. Lucas glanced down at the 5,000 yuan in crisp bills, fanned and rubber-banded like a gang offering. I turned to him. "Thanks for the ride." "You're not walking home with that," he said flatly. "Where do you live?" "It's not far." "Don't care. I'll drive." Before I could protest, he was already striding toward the Ferrari parked outside. Fire-red and sun-drenched, it looked like a misplaced dream on a cracked sidewalk. "You're joking," I muttered when he popped open the door. Lucas shrugged. "Not mine. It's my investors." I borrow it when I need people to take me seriously. They know. He slid in and started the engine. They will when they see the parking tickets. The alley where I lived was a tangle of clotheslines, leaking pipes and plastic stools where the neighborhood aunties lounged like sentries. As we turned the corner, every head swiveled at once. I sighed. You're about to make headlines in someone's group chat. Lucas grinned. Happy to oblige. He pulled the Ferrari right up to the curb, the sound of its engine rattling tin windows. Before I could stop him, he stepped out, popped the trunk and began unloading. You brought groceries? I hissed. I got them for you, he said. Thought it might make things less awkward. Also, it keeps me from looking like your sugar daddy. God forbid, I muttered. Mrs. Liu, my landlord, emerged from her doorway like a vulture spotting roadkill. Ivy, she called, squinting. Who is that? Your boyfriend. Lucas snorted so hard he choked. Second uncle, I said quickly. He's on a business trip nearby. Just checking in. Lucas recovered fast. Yup. I was passing by and I heard my niece had a rough week at school. Thought I'd drop in. He grabbed a carton of eggs and handed them to her like a peace offering. For all the trouble, ma'am. Mrs. Liu's eyes gleamed. He's generous, huh? He's also leaving soon, I added. Lucas gave me a sidelong grin but didn't argue. He pulled out 2 crates of milk, a bag of vegetables and a gift pack of snacks with a grinning cartoon baby on the front. One by one the neighbors appeared, drawn by curiosity and the promise of free eggs. Within minutes, the Ferrari was surrounded by gossip, questions, and the sounds of peeling tape as Mrs. Liu opened the gift box right there on the steps. I finally shoved Lucas toward the door. You need to go before they start asking if we're secretly married. Relax, he said, still grinning. You handled it well. Even I started believing I was your uncle. I held up the eggs he hadn't given away. Payment for your performance. He ruffled my hair. Take care of yourself, kid. Scram, second uncle. He turned to leave but hadn't made it 5 steps before someone yanked him back by the collar. Lucas stumbled, instantly alert. What the? My stomach turned. I didn't have to look. I already knew. Where is she? Nathan Hale's voice barked. Lucas twisted away and shoved him back instinctively. Nathan stumbled 2 meters before catching his balance, looking disheveled and unhinged. The alley fell silent. He hadn't expected an audience. Who the hell are you? Nathan demanded, glaring at Lucas. Lucas turned to me. You know this guy? I sighed. Unfortunately. Mrs. Liu gasped, recognizing him. That's the boy from the Hale family, isn't it? Ivy, what's going on? Nothing, I said smoothly. Just a misunderstanding. Nathan's eyes swept over us, landing on the 100 yuan bill Lucas had just handed me for groceries. His face twisted. Who is this man? He roared. Are you living with him now? Is this why you're ruining everything? None of your business, I said sharply. It is my business, he snapped. My mother paid for your education. You think you can just take her charity and flirt with strange men? I stepped forward. My voice dropped. Say that again. Nathan opened his mouth, but I held up my hand and turned to go inside. When I returned a minute later, I held a small envelope, plain and sealed. I walked straight to him and shoved it into his chest. He caught it, confused. What's this? Receipts, I said. 3 years tuition. 1,000 per year in aid. Interest included. He opened it. 15 crisp bills. I met his gaze squarely. We're done, I said. I don't owe you. I don't owe your mother. I don't owe any of you. Nathan's throat bobbed. The crowd watched in stunned silence. This is about revenge, isn't it? He whispered. You're doing all this to hurt me. No, I said calmly. I'm doing this so you'll never be able to hurt me again. And with that, I turned and walked into my building, letting the door slam behind me. Later that night, I sat cross-legged on my thin mattress, counting coins and ramen packets. Outside, the alley buzzed with speculation. Inside, my heart buzzed with something else. Not joy. Not peace. Purpose. The kind that couldn't be bought with tuition or tamed with bloodline. Let the Hales burn. Let them throw their money in tantrums. I had my own fire now. And I had only just lit the match. The first thing I noticed when I stepped into the classroom again was the silence. Not the respectful kind. The anticipatory kind. The kind people hold before a punchline they're too afraid to deliver out loud. I walked in with my head held high, my cast still on, my uniform freshly pressed, and a paper bag of warm bread rolls clutched in my good hand. Brielle Monroe was already at her desk. I wasn't surprised. Eleanor Hale hadn't shown up to court. But she'd clearly pulled strings to get her darling back in school on bail. Brielle looked paler than usual. Her makeup couldn't cover the swelling under her eyes or the weight she'd clearly lost. But the smugness, still there. She leaned in to whisper something to the girls beside her. They snickered. Then, loud enough for the room to hear, she said, "My brother saw her. Getting out of a man's Ferrari. She looked real cozy with him." "Oh my God," one girl murmured. Another giggled. Maybe she got bored of playing the poor orphan card. "She's such a fake. I bet she's been doing this for years." Whispers spread like ink through water. Fast. Uncontrollable. I didn't look at her. I walked calmly to my seat and set down my bag. My desk mate, Clara, shifted awkwardly, clearly torn between curiosity and guilt. I didn't blame her. Brielle had ruled this classroom like a queen. Flawless, protected, untouchable. The kind of girl who destroyed you with a smile and made the whole school cheer for it. But now she was trying too hard to reclaim her crown. And people could smell desperation like blood. During break, I leaned back in my chair and took a long sip of water. Then very slowly, I raised the cup in Brielle's direction and made a toasting gesture. Her eyes narrowed. I smirked and mouthed, "How does it taste?" Her face turned green. Then, to my utter lack of surprise, she gagged. Actually gagged. In the middle of the classroom. The sound echoed in the stunned silence. She stumbled from her desk and threw up in the corner wastebasket. Loud. Violent. Messy. The teacher walked in mid-gag, took one look at the scene and sighed. "Take her to the infirmary. You go with her. And someone clean that up." Two girls hesitated before dragging Brielle out of the room. No one else moved. No one offered comfort. They just stared. The teacher looked around, eyes dark. Then she turned to me. "Ivy, are you okay? Has she been bothering you again?" My brows lifted. This woman had spent 2 years pretending I didn't exist, even when I showed up with burn marks and missing books. Now suddenly I mattered. "I'm fine," I said. She nodded. "Let me know if that changes. This classroom is for learning, not theater." A stunned hush fell over the room. Even Clara looked shocked. The tide had shifted. And everyone could feel it. Later that day, I stopped by the teacher's office to pick up my registration form for the upcoming state-level academic competition. When I turned the corner, I heard them, Brielle's little court of admirers. But this time they weren't worshipping her. They were dissecting her. "You don't think it's weird? How obsessed she is with Nathan. She goes after every girl who gets close to him. My aunt said Brielle's not even really related to the Hales. They adopted her from some charity project when she was like 6. She probably thinks she can marry him. EW. That's disgusting. I wouldn't be surprised. You saw how she clung to him during the principal's office scene. Ivy didn't even cry when she walked in injured. But Brielle was howling like someone canceled her birthday party. They laughed. Loudly. I stepped back and walked around the other way, avoiding the confrontation. I didn't need to say a word. They were doing my work for me. At lunch, Brielle returned from the infirmary. Her face was pale, her lips cracked, her makeup gone. She looked like a ghost in a designer blazer. The classroom was louder than usual, deliberately so. Students made no effort to lower their voices. "I heard she's going to jail." "Yeah, my cousin works at the court. Said her case is being accelerated. She deserves it. Remember Ping Ping from last year? Brielle had her beat up just because Nathan joked about her once. Ping Ping. Meizhong. The quiet girl who nearly jumped off the roof. I wondered if she was okay now. If she knew that justice was finally moving. Brielle heard the whispers. She sat stiffly, her fork clutched in her trembling hand, her rice untouched. Then something in her broke. With no warning, she stood, marched to the back of the classroom and slapped a girl across the face. The crack echoed. The room went silent. The girl, a petite brunette named Lacey, stumbled, her hand flying to her cheek. "You!" Brielle screamed. "You're all liars. I see you. I hear you. I made this class what it is. I was protecting Nathan. I was protecting everything. She didn't get to finish. 3 girls, her former allies, stood up together. You need to sit down, one of them said. Another cracked her knuckles. Or what? You'll burn us too. Brielle blinked, uncertain. You really think you're still queen? The third girl said, stepping closer. Look around, Brielle. No one's scared of you anymore. Lacey recovered and said nothing, just reached forward and pulled Brielle's ponytail. It was the spark that lit the fuse. Within moments, Brielle was being dragged down the hallway toward the restroom, the same one where this all began. The classroom erupted. Students followed, phones raised, laughter echoing through the walls. I didn't move. I just sipped my water and listened. Shrieking. Crying. A scream. A thud. No one stopped it. No one cared. Brielle Monroe had lost her crown. And the wolves she'd once led? They were hungry. She came back 20 minutes later. Hair tangled. Shirt wrinkled. Face blotchy. She didn't look at anyone. Didn't speak. Just sat. Her hands trembled as she reached for her pen. No one offered her tissues. No one acknowledged her return. The queen had fallen. And there was no throne waiting. The teacher walked in and called my name. Ivy Chin. Come see me after class to confirm your competition slot. I nodded. She smiled at me. And just like that, in front of everyone, she picked a side. Not the Hales. Not the powerful. Me. I leaned back in my seat and watched the golden light spill across the classroom tiles. The burn on my wrist had scabbed over. My cast still ached. But I was healing. Not just from what was done to me, but from who I used to be. This world didn't belong to queens. It belonged to survivors. And I was still standing. I won the state competition with my right arm still in a cast. The trophy was absurdly large, gold plastic wrapped around a steel rod, nearly as tall as my desk. It gleamed under the classroom lights like a weapon. When the judge handed it to me, he said, "You're quite something, Miss Chin. The highest score we've seen in 5 years." I thanked him politely, but I barely registered the applause. All I could think about was how different this moment felt compared to the last time I held this same trophy. In another lifetime, when I was married into the Hale family and the win had been dismissed as expected. This time I was no one's prize. And yet, everyone was watching. The local media picked up my win by the next morning. A photo of me in my school uniform, right arm wrapped in bandages, standing on stage with the trophy in one hand and a quiet expression on my face. Caption read, "Injured scholarship girl wins state math championship. Who is Ivy Chin?" I almost laughed when I saw it. That was the first time the world said my name without attaching someone else's to it. No longer Eleanor Hale's ward. No longer Nathan's fiancée. Just me. Lucas saw the article before I did. "Congratulations, genius," he said as he walked into the cafe we always met at. He dropped a box of steaming dumplings in front of me. "You broke the server traffic." "I'm not a celebrity." "Not yet," he said, grinning. "But it's coming." He was right. That same afternoon, 3 tech bloggers messaged his company asking about the girl in the photo. 2 wanted interviews. 1 wanted to offer me a scholarship directly. Lucas rejected all of them on my behalf. "You don't need that kind of noise right now," he said. "But it's good PR for the company." "We'll be fine," he said. "You're not my mascot. You're my developer. You wrote our core language model. I'd rather people discover that after we win." I stared at him for a long moment. He didn't flinch. He meant it. A week later, Lucas's company, now officially branded 11, held its official launch event. It wasn't flashy. No billion-dollar stage. No drones or models. Just a rented theater, 200 seats, and a projector that flickered slightly at the corners. Lucas stood on stage in a pressed shirt, hair still wild but clean. He didn't read from a script. He talked like a man who had waited years to finally speak in his own voice. And then halfway through he said, "There's someone I need to thank. Someone without whom this launch would have been impossible." He looked directly at me. In the middle of a lawsuit with a broken arm, she walked into our office with 3 algorithm models that changed everything. "Ladies and gentlemen, meet our youngest technical consultant." I didn't even hear the rest. The applause drowned him out. I stepped onto that stage in a wrinkled blazer and my school skirt. My cast still smelled faintly of paint from art class. I held my math trophy in one hand and the mic in the other. I wasn't supposed to say anything. But then I did. I grew up believing silence was safer than truth, I said quietly. Then someone burned me. Literally. And I realized the only person who could protect me was me. The audience didn't clap right away. They listened. And that was better. By the end of my short speech, Lucas's startup had gained 3,000 new followers and 500 early beta signups. By nightfall, it was on the front page of 3 major tech sites. Naturally, the media started digging. It didn't take long before someone made the connection. Ivy Chin, the injured girl genius behind a new Chinese-language search engine, was the same Ivy who had filed a criminal case against Brielle Monroe, the adopted daughter of Hale Group chairwoman Eleanor Hale. The headlines came fast. Scholarship girl sues elite heiress, then launches tech company? David and Goliath, the teen math prodigy versus the Hales. Beneath the pearls, the real face of Eleanor Hale? And Eleanor? She didn't respond, which only made it worse. When a journalist cornered her at a gala and asked if she planned to support Brielle's legal defense, Eleanor replied coldly, "I choose to focus on my company, not scandal." It was the nail in the coffin. Public opinion shifted violently, the powerful matriarch discarding her daughter figure the moment she became a liability. Behind the scenes, Eleanor was scrambling. Nathan, reborn just like me, must have remembered Lucas's company from our last life. Back then it failed. So this time he'd advised Eleanor to invest early in a foreign search engine that was set to launch in 3 months. Hale Group poured millions into it. But what they didn't anticipate was me. Lucas's version, the one I helped build, launched early and smoother. Within days, the competitor's stock price crashed. Investors fled. Blogs mocked Hale Group for betting on the wrong horse. Their liquidity dried up. Eleanor had miscalculated. And this time there was no one to take the fall for her. Back at school, Brielle grew quieter with each passing day. Word got out that Eleanor had stopped answering her lawyer's calls. Eventually, the court assigned her a public defender. Brielle showed up to class wearing the same hoodie 3 days in a row. No makeup. No accessories. Her hair tangled. Her expression hollow. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just faded. Like a monarch stripped of everything but memory. 1 week before the final court hearing, I stood outside the school gates with someone I hadn't seen in months. Mei Zhang. She wore a beige coat and a scarf that nearly swallowed her face. Her posture was hunched, her eyes wide. But when she saw me, she straightened. "I'm scared," she said softly. "I know. I still hear her sometimes. Her voice. Her laughter. She can't touch you anymore." She looked at me and for a moment I saw something I hadn't expected. Not fear. Gratitude. "Will you come with me?" she whispered. "To court." I nodded. Every step. The morning of the trial, I wore my cleanest uniform and tied my hair back neatly. I wasn't there to win. I was there to witness. To sit beside a girl who'd once been voiceless and remind her, and myself, that we weren't powerless anymore. Justice wasn't fast. It wasn't glamorous. But it was coming. And I was ready for it. The courtroom smelled like varnish and nerves. The benches were packed. Reporters, school administrators, curious strangers, and a few familiar faces from my past life. Though I avoided all of them. I sat quietly beside Mei Zhang, who hadn't let go of my hand since we arrived. Her fingers were cold. Her knuckles white. She was trembling, but she was here. And that alone was a victory. Brielle Monroe sat at the defendant's table, head bowed, hair limp and unwashed. She wore a faded school sweater that hung off her frame like a borrowed identity. There was no makeup this time. No high ponytail. No haughty smile. Just silence. Her court-appointed lawyer flipped through notes. He didn't look at her once. The judge adjusted his glasses. "Let the record show that the defendant, Brielle Monroe, is charged with multiple counts of assault, conspiracy to cause bodily harm and defamation against multiple minors. The court has reviewed all submitted video evidence, eyewitness testimonies, and medical documentation." He paused. The room held its breath. "This court finds the defendant guilty on all charges." No one gasped. No one sobbed. The air simply thickened. For the severity of the offenses and the emotional and physical damage caused to the victims, the judge continued, and taking into account the defendant's age and absence of prior convictions, this court sentences Brielle Monroe to 6 years in juvenile detention, with the possibility of parole after 4. He struck the gavel. A sound that echoed like the breaking of a long, suffocating silence. Brielle didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply sagged in her seat as though the verdict had been a weight she had long expected. The lawyer turned to her. "We'll appeal," he whispered. Brielle didn't respond. Cameras flashed. Reporters surged forward. Miss Chin, is it true you helped build the 11 search engine? Do you regret not settling privately with the Hales? What would you say to Eleanor Hale now? Lucas's voice cut through the noise like a blade. She has no comment. Back off. He had appeared quietly like he always did, suddenly and at just the right time. May stood beside me, still holding my hand. Her breathing was uneven. I didn't think I'd survive this," she whispered. "You did. I don't feel brave." I turned to her. "You showed up. That's more than most people ever do." Her eyes filled, but she didn't let the tears fall. Instead, she reached up and removed her cap. Then her face mask. In front of all the cameras. All the reporters. She stepped forward, trembling, and wrapped her arms around me. Flashbulbs exploded. I didn't hug her back immediately. I was too stunned. But then I did. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something like peace. We exited through the back stairwell. The front was flooded with media and guards. The hallway was narrow, cold. Sunlight streamed in through high windows. And just before we reached the final landing, I looked up and saw it. A white sparrow, perched on the highest window pane. Its head tilted, its tiny eyes watching. Then it spread its wings and flew. The sound of its feathers against the still air was almost too quiet to hear. But I heard it. Freedom. Outside, the wind was sharp. Winter had come early that year. The trees had long shed their leaves. My breath clouded the air as I stepped into the sunlight, blinking hard. May stood beside me, holding a court-issued folder with trembling hands. She looked at me. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. "You?" She smiled. "Not yet. But I'm closer." We stood in silence. The courthouse loomed behind us like the ending of an old chapter. But I didn't look back. There was nothing left to revisit. Eleanor Hale hadn't appeared. Nathan hadn't shown up either. The empire they once built? Crumbling. The daughter they once protected? Gone. I hadn't cried during the verdict. I didn't feel victorious or righteous. I just felt empty. And somehow that was enough. Because the pain, the fear, they were finally over. We parted at the train station. May waved from the window as the carriage pulled away, her pale face lit by the soft yellow glow inside. I stood on the platform for a long time. Not moving. Not thinking. Just breathing. And then slowly I turned and walked away. My arms still in a sling. My heart still healing. But my soul, lighter than it had ever been. I didn't expect my name to trend. Not after a courtroom verdict. Not after months of silence. Not after everything that had already been said, twisted, gossiped, and repackaged. But there was #IvyChin. Right beneath it. The girl who took down the Hales and built a tech empire. I stared at it for all of 5 seconds, then turned off my phone. Because I hadn't done it for a hashtag. I'd done it so I could sleep at night without hearing my own scream echo in my head. 2 weeks after Brielle's sentencing, Lucas walked into our shared office, slapped a folder down on my desk and grinned. "Sign it." "What is it?" "Proof you're not just some intern with genius code," he said, shoving a pen into my hand. "I'm making you a partner." I stared at him. Inside the folder were legal documents. Official, notarized, and shockingly generous. 20% equity. Co-founder title. Patent co-ownership on our core search language model. The one I'd built from memory. "Lucas. Don't get weird about it," he said. "You already built half of this company. I'm just putting your name on it." I read the first page again even though I'd memorized every word. "You're serious?" He leaned against the desk. "Deadly. And before you say you don't need it, let me stop you. You do. Because this is how we rewrite history." Investors flooded in after that. The courtroom trial hadn't hurt us. It had elevated us. We weren't just a scrappy startup anymore. We were a movement. A rebellion. A symbol. IvyChin, the girl with the broken arm and sharp tongue, had sued her elite abuser and built something better. It was the kind of story media loved. Which is exactly why I started turning down interviews. And sponsorships. And university ambassador offers that wanted to slap my face on their brochures as some inspiration bait girl who made it. I wasn't a brand. I was building something real. And I didn't owe anyone a sound bite. Lucas, bless him, handled the firestorm like a seasoned PR director. She's busy coding, he told every journalist who came knocking. She's focused on the next release. She's 17. Leave her alone. Meanwhile I worked. I built plugins, designed user pathways, wrote test scripts in 3 languages, and helped onboard our first major clients. The office we rented downtown had just enough space for 5 desks and a coffee machine that sputtered more than it brewed. But the first time I walked in and saw a nameplate on the glass that read, Ivy Chen, co-founder 11 Tech. I felt something crack and settle in my chest. Like I'd finally come home. Hale Group collapsed gradually, then all at once. Their international search engine investment nosedived. The stock plummeted. Shareholders revolted. Eleanor tried to delay the fall with staged press conferences and token partnerships, but the damage was irreversible. One afternoon a reporter sent me a clip, Eleanor stepping down as chairwoman of Hale Group after 37 years. She didn't look defeated. She looked distant. Like someone watching a building burn from behind glass. Nathan didn't appear with her. But he surfaced a week later, caught by paparazzi in a subway station, disheveled, dressed in a wrinkled hoodie, face drawn. He didn't speak to the cameras. Didn't look up. He just waited for the train. As though time might carry him backward. I received a letter the next day. Thick cream envelope. No return address. Handwritten. Inside only 3 lines. I was wrong. I see that now. I'm sorry. No signature. No requests. Just ink and silence. I read it twice. Then with no hesitation I dropped it in the ashtray beside my desk. Lit a match. And watched it burn. Later that evening a journalist found me leaving the building. He had a camera slung over one shoulder and a notepad in hand. His eyes were tired but curious. Miss Chen, he said. One question. I stopped. He hesitated. Do you think this was all a revenge? I thought about that. About Brielle in court. About Eleanor's silence. About the sparrow flying free. No, I said finally. It wasn't revenge. He raised a brow. I simply stopped being silent, I said. And the world couldn't handle the noise. The next morning I arrived at the office before anyone else. The windows were fogged with winter breath. The radiator hummed in the corner. The city outside was still waking up. I walked to my desk. My nameplate caught the early light. On the wall beside it, blueprints for our next launch were pinned like a battle map. Sketches, algorithms, colored wires crisscrossing potential markets. This was my kingdom now. Built not on marriage or bloodline, but on knowledge. On defiance. On grit. Lucas arrived minutes later, yawning, holding 2 steaming cups of tea. He handed me one. No coffee? I asked. You always burn your tongue. Fair. We sat in silence, sipping tea, watching the screens light up one by one. I forgot to ask, he said eventually. Any plans now that you've crushed a corporate dynasty? I looked out the window. The sun was rising behind the buildings, flooding the skyline in orange and gold. I smiled. Yeah, I said. I think I'm just getting started. The end.